Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1061 of our daily content grind, and today I have decided it is time, long over time, to start answering a few lingering Patreon requests, and we're going to begin with the oldest one on the docket, which was someone asking me to do a video that was essentially what I would do for a sequel to Beast Wars instead of Beast Machines. Now, we've already rewritten Beast Machines in its entirety. That's not what we are doing here today. We are going to continue the idea of the existing characters in their existing characterizations, and we're going to just say, like, what if there was a Season 4, or what if there was, like, a Beast Wars 2 in America? So that's the general idea. So let's see what we got here. So a lot of times when I come up with these creative ideas, and when people ask me, oh, can you rewrite this, come up with a story for a character like that, there's one place you always start with any kind of story like this, and that is the loose ends. Every time I come up with some kind of fanficky idea for what to do with Transformers in general, I always look for those little things that went unexplained, or those little things that were left lingering by the end of the series that we can actually divulge into and kind of like tie up in a way that lets us continue the story. So if we are looking at the finale of Beast Wars and whatever loose plot threads there are, then the things that I have to work with are, elements like the Predacons Council, which we barely touched on, even though they seemed very up there and influential. The Voog, whose story really didn't end. If anything, you think they'd be out for a vengeance, considering, they had some fatalities, apparently, at the end of Beast Wars. We have all the lingering tech that is still on Earth, and any kind of potential crises that could cause to the timeline. We have, who else? What else? Well, the surviving cast, of course. We got them to work with, and what are we going to do with them once I get back to Cybertron? So we got those kind of elements, and then it's just a matter of, like, okay, what's an interesting thing to do with said elements? And how do we actually make it into something interesting that actually feels like a continuation of Beast Wars rather than just another story, which is kind of what Beast Machines was. So before we go into like actual story stuff, and I'm not going to make this like some long-winded, like this is what I do for episode 14. This is what I would do for episode 21. I'm not going to come up with a whole thing. We're just going to pitch a concept. A hypothetical Season 4, essentially. That's all we're going to go for today. We're not going to go hugely in-depth or make an hour-long video out of it. So, before we get into the actual story meat and what I would actually do with the characters, let's go with aesthetics, because they're not going to keep their beast modes on Cybertron. Those were so that they could blend in on Earth. So we need something else. We need new stuff. So we could take the TransTech route, which would be to make them super sci-fi in design, give them vehicle modes, leave in a lot of their more animalistic elements. Keep in mind, TransTech was designed to follow after Beast Machines, so some of that high-tech would not exist in this hypothetical Season 4. But I do like the idea of returning the main cast back to vehicle modes, but still keeping enough of their original Earth appearance so that they actually do seem like themselves. So, more like the way animated Cheetor turned out. Now, this is kind of an homage to the TransTech design, but it is a lot more solid in nature. It's a lot more fitting of, Cybertronian in design, a lot sleeker. This is more like the lines of where we would fall as far as aesthetics go. Okay? As far as just like new character designs, I would follow mostly the kind of designs and vehicles that I suggested in, like, here's the vehicle modes for the Beast Wars cast, with the caveat of they would be far more Cybertronian in design. Okay? And they would carry trace amounts of their original beast modes. So Rhinox's vehicle mode might have a horn. It might have the rhino horns in the front. Cheetor obviously gets to keep his cheetah spots, things like that. So you keep the character without having to rely on the beasts, because now we're marketing character rather than the fact that they are animals. You know, animals don't make sense on Cybertron unless you do something weird like Beast Machines did with the reformatting, the organic core, etc., etc. We ain't doing any of that here. We ain't doing any of that here. We're using the existing elements to write the next part of the story. Like I said, the biggest lingering thing we have to work with is the Predacons Council, who did seem like they wanted to take back the planet Cybertron in the name of the Predacons. However, it also seems like they were far more patient and more methodically planned than Megatron was. So that just kind of leaves us with what exactly were they going to do and where would they fall. So in a hypothetical season 4 or a sequel series, these would be your canonical villains. These would be the big bads that we would have, let's say, a couple of seasons in order to defeat. In my little fiction, the Transformers, the Maximals, along with a captured Megatron, would return to Cybertron to a hero's welcome, but the planet is not exactly as harmonious as it was when they left. The Predacons Council decided to make a move, and the Predacons are trying to cause an uprising. General chaos, sabotage, you know, that kind of thing. It's not an overt, like, out there war, you know, there's still, like, daily life going on, as my dog starts barking at a delivery person. But more to the point, it would be more like underground stuff, trying to bring society down, trying to, basically just trying to take them down from within type thing. A lot less overt than what Megatron was going for. Something that starts at the ground level and kind of tears everything down itself. I find them to be far more calculating, and this is about the approach that I would expect here. That said, they are coming with a lot more numbers than the Maximal Council actually expected. So this is where, having a few other troops, especially ones that seem like they've been empowered since leaving, this is where that actually comes into play a lot more, and this is where we start getting to play with exactly what the roles of the Maximal cast are going to be on Cybertron. I'm going to start with Cheetor, because Cheetor did the most growing in Beast Wars, so now him back on Cybertron is going to be something of a fish out of water. You know, this is someone who in Season 1 was, even Season 2, was excited to go to amusement parks, like a kid would. That's his idea of fun on Cybertron, so that's what he's excited to get back to, just to find out that his tastes and what he loved before aren't really hitting the same way. He's grown up. He's hardened. He's been through a literal war with the fate of reality, in the balance. A roller coaster really doesn't do it anymore. He'll ride, but he's bored. He'll take a swing at the shooting gallery, but it's too easy. His shot's gotten too good. It's just not the same. The planet Cybertron is not what he expected it to be when he came back. So he has to find out where his place is now, and that's more character growth for Cheetor to continue his story from Beast Wars. Rat Trap is also going to find Cybertron a little bit different, as a lot of the establishments that he was bragging about, a little bit more the scandalous ones, don't really seem to be in operation anymore. Something about the planet now having another crisis on its hands have taken the priorities elsewhere, and a lot of the places he was looking forward to are slow, empty, not nearly as exciting as he expected them to be. So he kind of falls in with the same mentality as Cheetor, where things have changed, and not in a way that he's really in favor of. Oh, by the way, I am using the Season 1 because I figure 3-4 years out from the first wave of Beast Wars, I figure if they're going to revamp all of them into Cybertronian forms, they're going to take them back to their original color schemes. So these are a little bit more representative of what they would be, even though they would be fully Cybertronian, and more likely they would be far more upgraded and ideally still kind of transmetal in design, because, part of why they're going to be important in this season, in this current iteration of Cybertron, is because they have these abilities that make them something of a match for what's happening. There is something about their transmetal natures that are actually more effective against these new enemies and new Predacons than what the Maximals had on hand. That's going to be important to remember. Keep that, write it down. We're going to get back to that here in a minute. Of all of them, Rhox is pretty much the only one that is kind of acclimating back into Cybertron, pretty much exactly where he was. He can run security detail, he can get back to the normal jobs he had, but now he faces an issue because he doesn't have the transmetal upgrades that keep everybody else on the edge and giving them the advantage. So what is Rhox to do when he can return to his old job, he can return to just being, Cybertronian security, or he goes to help his friends, knowing that he is underpowered and, not really measuring up. So he has to find new ways of, being able to contribute and keep himself, helping his friends. So he's got to find something new to do too. Now, we'll fix Rhox eventually, and I'll explain that here in a bit. Silverbolt does. Now, we don't think of it as... we don't really think of it because Fusors are a very different gimmick than Transmetal, but canonically, their Fusor forms do have some elements of Voog energy in them. They still are partially Transmetal. So he still does gain the benefits, and for whatever reason, his form is more effective against the new threats the Predacons have than your standard Cybertronian. He is more like almost, I don't want to say monster. We would deal with very much like the Thing from Marvel Comics, where yes, he is being heroic, and he is absolutely interested in being the hero and saving the day, because, hey, he's superhero coded. That said, he is also kind of an outcast on Cybertron at the moment, because, his superstructure is so different. He'd be one that would be difficult. Like, to reformat him would either one or the other, or triple changer kind of thing. Or figuring out some way of adapting Fusor tech into a vehicle. That's tricky. And it's going to make him stand out a lot on Cybertron, and there's more that you can do to play with that. When you have a population that might see him being heroic, but might also still be uncomfortable around him because he is so different physically than the rest of Cybertron. Yeah, there's connotations you can draw from that, but as long as you're pulling that into a positive, and as long as you're teaching a lesson in where that needs to go and what that mindset, what you need to do with that mindset, that's good. That's fine. It goes back to like how these cartoons were supposed to teach lessons to kids. It's not going to be the only thing he's dealing with, because we have Black Arachnia to accommodate. Now, yeah, she is a Maximal, but she wasn't on the original crew manifesto, and she doesn't give off the same energy readings as everybody else. Even though her programming for being a Predacon is gone, she still has the mindset, and she still has, and she still has the tracings of being a Predacon, which can be spotted. So this one is sus. She's put under a lot of scrutiny by the Maximals in charge of the planet. There is a level of distrust for a former Predacon because, to them, it's probably been a long, long time since anyone has actually turned sides. So, you know what? This one would be problematic. In my story, this distrust that the Maximal elders would have in her would eventually lead to her siding up with the Tripredacus Council. Is just a need to just get away from all this heavy scrutiny and distrust. She proved herself to the Maximals, but now there's these Maximals, and now she is distrusted again, and Now she kind of sees the Tripredacus side of things. Don't flip out. This is something I would do probably I would do this like midway through season 1, and then end of season 1 I would pay this off because the whole thing is a ruse. Primal vouched for her, that's good enough for them, but this can be played with. We can actually work with this because Black Arachnia is pretty great at being the saboteur, and she's pretty great at putting on a performance. The Tripredacus Council are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker when a former Pred decides, I want to be a Pred again, only to, just to find out, suckers, I've been waiting for the right time. But it's not going to be a one-episode thing like Rat Trap. It's going to carry out through half of a season, so you actually have time to build it up and believe it. I would question, the one thing I haven't decided is if Silverbolt would be in on this or not. Because it'd be heartbreaking for him. It'd be a lot for him to go through character-wise. But also, it'd be so much more believable if he's just heartbroken. Seeing Black Arachnia on the opposite side of the battlefield again. So I'm kind of curious. I'm not sure which side of that coin would be right to play. That leaves Primal. And Primal is a little bit different because of how much more powerful he's become. In the face of a brand new threat from the Predacons, all of a sudden he's the most powerful thing they have to fight against them. So there is something to be said of identity here. Primal in his current state is too big for Cybertron. Whereas you find like Cheetor and Rat Trap's old dives don't really feel right anymore. These places literally don't feel right. He's, to have to duck to get into every room, or to not even be able to enter some rooms, just to find nothing is sized for him, and just to feel out of place and uncomfortable in his own home. But then again, it's this body that gives them such a powerful advantage over the Predacons. Now, the Maximals we're not going to portray as, like, too eager for him to stay this way for the sake of battle, but he is going to be heavily pushed to stay this way, but ultimately it's his choice to make, whether he gets reformatted back into something that's easier to work with on the planet at the cost of potentially not being as powerful or effective in battle, which ultimately he will decide that. I figure 2-part opening episode, where part 1 is all the Maximals accommodating themselves to Cybertron again. It's how we learn about Cybertron, through their eyes and their expectations, especially the likes of Silverbolt, who's never known Cybertron. So it's a good way of introducing us to the planet, as well as a refresher for people who might not have seen Beast Wars. This is a great way of establishing things between all the characters without getting too plot heavy. But the choice for Primal is ultimately, keep the advantages for battle, which he was never designed for battle, remember. He's an explorer. He's a scientist. Keep the advantages for battle, but not fit into his home world anymore, or risk his advantages in combat for the sake of, being who he is, essentially. And eventually, who he is going to win out. And, end of episode 2, end of the 2-parter, against, whatever Predacon threat there is that episode, that's when he's going to prove that, yeah, he might be diminished, but he's by no means, ineffective. He is still Optimus Primal, very heroic, very powerful, regardless of whether or not he's Autobot-sized or not. So, there's where you do with the cast. So, what other things can we play with here? And I'll try to go through these quickly. The High Council, the Maximal High Council, would end up being significant characters. We don't have to make models for all of them. They can be kept in shadow for the most part, but we're going to get some good aspects of like exactly how things work and what they are doing in the background. For instance, cleaning up all the mess on prehistoric Earth that would lead to a few shenanigans with the time stream. It does, you blow some, human's mind in the 20th century when some archaeological dig finds, the head of Quick Strike. Both of them. So we need to figure that one out. So they've been space bridging back and forth from Earth since the Maximals returned and got, gave their reports. And they've been cleaning up what they can. They cleaned up all the remains of the Axelon and the Dark Side. So the Predacon ships are gone. They've reacclimated the tribe to be using natural tools rather than scraps of Inferno and Quick Strike. The only things that they couldn't account for are the things that they did not have exact presence on. The things that the Maximals could not directly report. One of them being the location of the lost stasis pods, and the other one being the location of Waspinator. There's going to be a whole episode where they space bridge down to Earth just for the sake of dragging Waspinator back to Cybertron, so a living transformer throughout history doesn't muck with the time stream. I just want Waspinator back. I want to give him... Now, it doesn't matter what story I'm writing for Beast Wars. I'm going to give Waspinator a good ending because he deserves a good ending. For the sake of the episode, we're also going to introduce another villain who's also going to pose one last threat on Earth to the Maximals, and that is going to be a Voq-empowered Tarantulas. Something about merging his Spark with a couple of Voq is giving him something of a Waspinator quality of it's extremely hard to kill him now. Combine that with the powers he gained from the Voq as well as their knowledge, and now you have someone who is far more threatening than even Megatron was. There will be a skirmish, there will be a fight, he is scary. They have to out-trick and outmaneuver Tarantulas in order to get away. I'm gonna do some cartoonish thing like a drop off a cliff or something in order to write him out of the episode. And just to go like, now he's... Or like, they have a limited amount of time. Since it's a one-way space bridge, they have just like this little beacon that says like, this is where we are, this is where the bridge is, reopen it. Tarantulas wants to use it to get back to Cybertron. So the trick here would be keeping a very powerful opponent away from your one-way home. And then when the gate is, when the time is, when the time is met, like if you've got an hour to find Waspinator, you've got 6 cycles to find Waspinator, whatever the time limit is. Okay, 6 mega cycles. Let's say 6 mega cycles. 6 hours. Whatever the time limit is. They have to get back before that time limit's up. It's more traditional episode setup. But they do get home. They get Waspinator back to Cybertron. They have to go clean up Tarantulas later. Someone's already done that. I'm giving the Tripredacus Council their own space bridges as well. So, the crux here, and what's been going on behind the scenes, is that once the Maximals returned to Cybertron and gave this entire report about what was going on prehistoric Earth, the Voq, because they have people inside, they get the full report, and they go, there's advantages there. There's the alien tech from the Voq that might still be left behind. There is the there's the energon deposits that might still be there. There's the tech left behind by Megatron. There's a lot to salvage. So that's what they do. And among the things they salvage is Tarantulas. He survives the encounter because the Tripredacus Council came to his aid. Remember, these are his bosses, and they are very interested in how powerful and knowledgeable he has become. But rather than returning to their original point, rather than just space bridging back, keep in mind, Beast Wars is about time travel shenanigans. And the Voq are time travelers. He has the knowledge to do this. So rather than going back to the moment they came, they go back to before the Maximals arrived on the planet. Does that sound familiar? Tarantulas has actually been on Cybertron the entirety of Season 4, Beast Wars 2, whatever. He's been there giving them the knowledge of the Voq and their weaponry in order to gain an advantage over the Maximals. This is why the transmetal powers of the Maximal cast from Beast Wars is more effective, because we've seen where Voq tech doesn't work as well on them as it does normal Cybertronians. So they carry this advantage. It's why they are still important to this show. Now, at some point, once we get into like Season 2, all the deconstruction they did in order to put the maximal cast into their new Cybertronian bodies, the deconstruction is going to lead to them learning how transmetal tech works. So instead of some, like, cataclysmic thing going on in order to upgrade everybody like we did Beast Wars, instead, the Maximals have actually learned how to upgrade with transmetal tech themselves. So Rhinox is the first to get back into battle with what is essentially Transmetal 3, but we'd probably have a new name for it. I don't have one offhand, but that's kind of where we would go. And that's where you get your Season 2 toys, just like Beast Wars had. Some of the Maximals will choose to stay in the forms that they're in because they're comfortable. Others will choose to get the upgrade, etc. So that's how you get a refresh of your characters, just like Beast Wars did. However, something Tarantula was also very good at was tracking down stasis pods. So that's where the Predacons on Cybertron have been getting their advanced numbers. That's why there's more of them than we expected, because these guys have been digging up all the blank pods and basically turning them into drone armies, duplicates, clones, whatever actually works. Again, like I said, I haven't fleshed this story out completely because I didn't want it to take too long, but that's kind of the idea I'm running with here. There's a couple other things that we could still incorporate. Season 2 would likely incorporate the Voog again, since their tech is being used to wage war on Cybertron. They might take umbrage with that and side with the Maximals over it. Because we know they're not evil. We know, they're just kind of like, they just kind of do their own thing. So we can play with that a little bit. And there might even be something to, like, both sides trying to court them. We'll see. But I think ultimately they would want their tech to stop being used like this, so Maximals it is. There is Starcream Spark still floating around. We can incorporate that, though I really don't think I would use it for anything major outside of, like, maybe a one-episode appearance or some weird Voog tech that Tarantula uses to capture its energy, or even, like, absorb the immortality it gives. What if Tarantula takes that spark in Season 2 and becomes even more powerful and immortal to act as, like, your final boss? The final boss of the Predacons Council. If he goes that far, he will depose them, by the way, because they can't hold a candle to him at that point. And that's what your final boss ends up being. But speaking of, what of Megatron? So he doesn't escape this time. He is successfully captured. But because of his state, look at who we're against. We're up against the Voog tech, which he has experience using. Tarantula, which he has plenty of experience with, and the Predacons Council, who they made it clear he's run afoul of them before. He is the one who knows what they need to know in order to counteract all of these threats. And Megatron being Megatron, he's doing this from behind a prison cell, and he is cooperating, but not to the extent that he could be. He's giving the Maximals enough information and enough advice in handling these situations for them to come out on the positive end of things, to come out with a net gain, but not for the actual full victory they were expecting. It's coming across like Tarantulas and the Predacons Council are just a little bit too wiry or one step ahead, when the reality is Megatron is keeping them one step ahead by not divulging everything he could. He'll know that Tarantulas would view certain things in certain ways and counter them in his own way. He knows these things, but he's not telling the Maximals that. So it always comes across as if Tarantula is just one step ahead and a little bit more clever and powerful than they thought. It's Megatron manipulating, because Megatron is always manipulating. And he's doing it because at some point he's going to try and convince the Maximal Council, I can't help the way you want me to help, stuck in this cell. If you want to actually win this war and defeat the Predacons Council, you gotta put me in. There is your cliffhanger for season 1. It is the Council agreeing to let Megatron out, giving him the reformatting into a new body, and a begrudging alliance between him and Optimus Primal. Now that there is a threat greater than Megatron in play, we can actually have the enemies aligning, albeit temporarily, just for a season. But it tells an interesting story, and it would have been great for a sequel to Beast Wars. So that's what I got for now. That's where like the rough idea is in my head. Obviously, there's a lot of room to flesh it out. I'm not going to do it here because we've already gone longer than I expected. But there's the pitch. There's your there's your elevator pitch. If the elevator took half an hour to actually get a Season 4 or a sequel to Beast Wars out there. So, let me know in the comments below what you think, what you would have done differently. Am I on the ball? Is this anywhere close to sounding good? I'll leave you to decide that. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.